You wake up. Your throat feels like sandpaper. Your sinuses are staging a full revolt. You walk to a cabinet, grab some ibuprofen and a decongestant, and by noon you're mostly functional again. Now take all of that away. No pharmacy, no doctor. No hospital 10 minutes down the road. No search engine to tell you whether your headache is stress or, according to the algorithm, something terrifying and rare. Just you, a forest, and whatever your ancestors had figured out about staying alive. And here's the strange part. They figured out a lot. For hundreds of thousands of years, before antibiotics, before surgery, before anyone had the faintest idea what a germ was, humans lived, healed, reproduced, and built entire civilizations without collectively dying off the moment. Someone caught a cold. So how did they actually do it? Before we go further, we need to throw out the image most people have of ancient medicine. The cartoon version goes something like cavemen standing around a fire, wishing they had penicillin, accomplishing nothing. That's not what happened. Ancient people weren't unintelligent. They were observant, intensely, relentlessly observant, because the cost of not paying attention was death. When you live close to the edge, you notice things. You notice which plant calms a stomachache. You notice which leaf makes a wound close faster. You notice that drinking water downstream from a dead animal tends to go badly. And that knowledge didn't disappear. It got passed down. Grandmother to granddaughter, healer to apprentice, generation after generation. Not written in textbooks, but stored in something just as durable: memory, ritual, and community tradition. The result was a medical system that, while missing our understanding of biology, was often shockingly effective. And for the things it couldn't fix, that's where the story gets more complicated and more human. Let's start with the most widespread medical tool ancient humans ever had: plants. This isn't fringe wellness talk. This is pharmacology with a history stretching back at least 60,000 years, and we have the physical evidence to prove it. In 1960, archaeologists excavating a cave in northern Iraq called Shanidar uncovered a Neanderthal burial site containing dense concentrations of pollen from multiple plant species: yarrow, groundsel, ephedra, and others. The leading interpretation is that these weren't wind-blown weeds. They were placed there deliberately. Here's the detail that should stop you. Several of those exact plants are still used in herbal medicine today, and some have been clinically studied with documented medicinal effects. Neanderthals, doing herbal medicine. Before modern humans had even arrived in that region once, Homo sapiens spread across the globe. Plant-based medicine exploded in sophistication. Willow bark, which contains salicin, the compound aspirin is derived from, was used independently in ancient Egypt. Greece, China, and indigenous North America to treat pain and fever. Different continents, no contact between them, same discovery. Because the cause and effect was simple enough to notice. Chew this bark, the pain fades. Garlic was used by ancient Egyptians as an antimicrobial, and modern studies confirm it genuinely has antibacterial properties. Turmeric, used for millennia in Ayurvedic medicine, contains curcumin, which has documented anti-inflammatory effects. Echinacea, long used by Native American tribes to support immune response, is still sold in pharmacies today. But ancient healers weren't just chewing on whatever looked promising. They developed real preparation protocols and which plants needed boiling, which roots only worked dried, which combinations of ingredients needed to be mixed in specific ratios. Some traditional formulas contained dozens of components. One is the active ingredient, others to mask bitterness, aid absorption, or offset side effects. That's not folklore. That's empirical pharmacology, just without lab coats. In a very real sense, ancient humanity was running one enormous, uncontrolled clinical trial. Sample size, everyone, methodology, chaos, failure rate, brutal. But the surviving data was often remarkably sound. Now let's talk about something that kills fast, and that ancient humans dealt with constantly: wounds. Hunting injuries, falls, combat. Accidents, open wounds were everywhere, and without antiseptics or sutures, a minor cut could turn fatal within days. So what did people do? Honey. Ancient Egyptians used honey on wounds extensively, and it wasn't superstition. Honey has low pH, high sugar concentration, and releases trace hydrogen, peroxide, all of which make it a hostile environment for bacteria. Modern medicine has rediscovered this. Medical-grade Manuka honey is an approved wound care product used in hospitals today. Clay. Certain mineral-rich clays have genuine antimicrobial properties, and cultures across the world independently applied clay poultices to wounds. Again, but not wrong. Maggots, stay with me. Maggot debridement therapy. Applying fly larvae to infected wounds so they consume only dead tissue. It was used by indigenous Australians, Maya healers in Central America, and military field surgeons throughout history. It's still used in modern hospitals for wounds that resist standard treatment. Maggots eat dead tissue and leave healthy tissue alone. Ancient observers noticed that wounds with maggots sometimes healed better, and instead of recoiling, they remembered it. Spider silk. Greek, Celtic, and Native American traditions applied spider webs directly to wounds to stop bleeding. Spider silk contains vitamin K, which supports blood clotting and has some antimicrobial qualities. Researchers today are actively studying spider silk as a biomaterial for wound closure. Ancient people kept stumbling onto things that were in fact real. Here's where it gets genuinely jaw-dropping. We have archaeological evidence of trepanation, drilling or scraping, a hole into the skull dating back over 9,000 years, and the patients often survived. We know this because the bone around the hole shows signs of healing, meaning the person didn't die on the table. Some skulls show multiple trepanation sites, meaning the same individual underwent the procedure more than once and walked away each time. Why did they do it? Treating skull fractures, relieving pressure after head trauma, addressing severe seizures or headaches, and very likely spiritual reasons too. Ancient medicine and ancient religion were rarely separate categories. But the core fact remains. People were performing brain surgery 9,000 years ago, with stone tools and surviving. There's also a skeleton recovered in France, roughly 7,000 years old, showing a forearm amputation with clear evidence of bone regrowth, meaning the patient survived long enough for the stump to heal. That requires more than just the surgical act. It requires aftercare, wound management, feeding and supporting someone through recovery. That's not a fluke. That's a functioning system of medical support. For context, effective antiseptic technique didn't become standard in modern medicine until the 1860s, when Joseph Lister proposed that doctors should wash their hands before surgery. Hospitals in the 1840s sometimes had higher mortality rates than battlefield surgery because conditions were so unsanitary, which means ancient trepanation surgeons, working outdoors with clean stone tools in open air, may have had better sterile conditions than 19th century European hospitals. The universe has a sense of humor. Here's something that rarely gets discussed in this conversation. Ancient humans didn't just survive because of the medicine they practiced. They survived because of what their immune systems had already become. The immune system learns. It adapts across generations. Populations exposed to a wide range of pathogens develop resistance over time. Children who survived early exposure often became immunologically formidable adults. This is also where herd immunity comes in, long before anyone understood the concept. When a disease swept through a population repeatedly across generations, individuals with greater natural resistance survived and reproduced at higher rates. Over centuries, the population's baseline resistance shifted. It was slow, brutal, and involved enormous loss, but it worked. This is also why European contact with the Americas was so catastrophic for indigenous populations. It wasn't that Europeans were biologically superior. It was that they carried diseases their populations had been building resistance to for centuries. Smallpox, measles, influenza. Indigenous Americans had no prior exposure and no inherited resistance. In some regions, mortality reached as high as 90%. The flip side is less discussed. Indigenous American populations carried their own immune advantages against diseases endemic to their environment. 1. European settlers often struggled with in turn. Your immune system, in a very real sense, is a record of what your ancestors survived. There's a growing body of research pointing to the gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your intestines, as central to immune function, mental health, and overall well-being. And ancient humans likely had spectacular microbiomes by modern standards. Why? Their diets were wildly diverse. Wild plants, fermented foods, varied animal sources. They were constantly exposed to soil and its microorganisms. They weren't sterilizing their environment. Fermented foods appear across nearly every ancient culture. Kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, kvass, injera. Fermentation began as a preservation technique, but it also loaded food with beneficial bacteria. Every traditional culture had its own version, essentially a probiotic supplement that predates the concept by millennia. Studies comparing the gut microbiomes of modern hunter-gatherer populations to industrialized populations consistently find dramatically higher microbial diversity in the former, and higher diversity correlates with better immune regulation, lower autoimmune disease rates, and improved metabolic health. There's increasing evidence linking the modern rise in allergies, autoimmune conditions, and certain mental health issues to the erosion of microbial diversity driven by antibiotics, ultra-processed food, chlorinated water, and an overall obsession with sterility. Ancient humans were constantly covered in dirt and bacteria, and in certain specific, measurable ways that may have actually been good for them. To be clear, this is not an argument against washing your hands. Please wash your hands. The relationship between microbes and health is just a lot more nuanced than clean equals good. Now let's talk about something that sounds completely unscientific but has real, documented backing: the placebo effect. If you believe you're going to get better, you often do. This isn't mysticism, it's measurable neuroscience. Placebo effects produce real changes in pain perception, immune activity, and recovery speed, even in cases where patients know they're receiving a placebo. Ancient healers, shamans, medicine women, ritual practitioners across countless cultures understood this intuitively, long before there was language for it. The ceremony mattered. The healer's confidence mattered. The visible presence of community mattered. When a shaman performed an elaborate ritual over a sick person, chanting specific herbs, fire, the participation of the whole community and something real was happening. Neurologically, the patient's brain was receiving a signal. You are being cared for. People are fighting for you. Something is being done. That signal has measurable physiological effects. Cortisol drops, immune activity shifts, pain perception changes. Recovery in many cases genuinely improves. Modern clinical
Was
sense?
ancient spiritual
No,
medicine
but it wasn't
real
nothing
medicine
either.
in the
It was tapping into something genuinely real about human biology. The body's capacity to heal differently depending on its psychological environment. Modern medicine is only now catching up. Bedside manner measurably affects outcomes. Social support improves survival rates in cancer patients. The mind-body connection, dismissed for decades by clinical medicine, is now taken seriously by serious researchers. Ancient healers got there first, by accident, through the same process of observation that gave us willow bark and honey on wounds. Fairness requires we talk about the other side too. There were things ancient medicine simply could not solve. Bacterial infections past a certain threshold were death sentences. Appendicitis, a routine hour-long surgery today, was fatal. Childbirth carried extraordinary risk for both mother and child. A dental infection could spread to the jaw and kill. A poorly healed broken bone meant permanent disability. Infant mortality was staggering, where in many ancient populations, somewhere between a quarter and half of children didn't reach adulthood. Life expectancy figures from the ancient world, often cited around 30 to 35 years, are heavily skewed by these early deaths. If you survived childhood and avoided violence and the dangers of childbirth, living into your 50s, 60s, even 70s was entirely possible. Archaeological remains show people living for decades with severe arthritis, healed major fractures, and serious old injuries. Old age existed. It just wasn't guaranteed. And here's the most sobering point of all. Many diseases that killed people in the ancient world still kill people today, in places without access to modern medicine. Malaria, tuberculosis, cholera, diarrheal disease in children. These aren't ancient curiosities. They're ongoing realities for hundreds of millions of people right now, suffering from conditions solvable by something sitting in a cabinet, a few miles from wherever you are. Modern medicine isn't a minor convenience. It's one of the most significant achievements in human history, and we've largely stopped being amazed by it. A few specific traditions deserve more than a footnote. Ancient Egyptian medicine, documented in the Ebers Papyrus from around 1550 BCE, describes over 700 remedies, along with descriptions of the cardiovascular system, surgical techniques, and pharmaceutical preparations, mixed seamlessly with magical incantations. For ancient Egyptians, medicine and religion weren't separate categories to begin with. Traditional Chinese medicine, developed over thousands of years, includes acupuncture, herbal therapy, dietary regulation, and physical manipulation. Some elements validated by modern research, others not. What stands out is the sheer scale of the system, centuries of detailed observation, and an enormously complex herbal pharmacopoeia. Ayurvedic medicine from the Indian subcontinent cataloged the properties of hundreds of plants and developed advanced surgical techniques. The physician Sushruta, working around 600 BCE, described procedures including reconstructive rhinoplasty, techniques so refined that 18th century British surgeons traveled to India, specifically to learn from practitioners still using his methods. Ancient Greece gave us Hippocrates, whose radical idea reshaped everything. Disease comes from natural causes, diet, environment, physical imbalance, and not the wrath of gods. That single idea that the body follows observable, reasoned natural laws is the foundational premise underlying all of modern medicine. And in Mesopotamia, clay tablets from ancient Sumer, over 4,000 years old, list specific plant treatments for specific symptoms in a format that is recognizably clinical. Not prayers. Prescriptions, symptom, treatment, preparation, dosage. The same basic structure a doctor uses today, just with more cuneiform and fewer Latin abbreviations. Ancient humans survived without medicine in the modern sense because, in the truest sense, they were never without medicine at all. They had plants, many containing genuinely active compounds. They had wound care that, while lacking germ theory, was often remarkably effective. They had immune systems forged by generations of pathogen exposure. They had fermented foods sustaining gut health. They had healers who understood intuitively the power of ritual and community. And they had something that mattered more than any single remedy: knowledge, accumulated and passed down across thousands of generations, refined not in laboratories, but in the only laboratory that's ever truly mattered: real life, real death, and everything in between. If this gave you a new way of looking at something you take for granted every single day, and subscribe. There's more where this came from.